The silence was the loudest thing in the room. A vast, echoing void that swallowed the forced laughter, the clinking champagne glasses, the saccharine scent of vanilla cake. I stood there, a man on the precipice, holding a thick envelope in trembling hands, and in that frozen moment, I knew my life, the one I had so meticulously built for 60 years, was about to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. This was my birthday, a celebration orchestrated with a chilling precision that mirrored my own professional expertise, but it was not for me. It was for them, for the final act of their meticulously planned betrayal. Before we begin, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It really helps this channel grow. And trust me, you'll want to hear this one through to the very end. Only a few days before, the illusion had been perfect. My wife, Eleanor, had become a vision of exaggerated domestic bliss. Her usual sharp wit, often tinged with a subtle condescension towards my predictable routines, was replaced by a cloying sweetness. She would bring me my coffee in bed, a ritual long abandoned, her smile unwavering, a little too wide, a little too fixed. "My darling William," she would purr, her voice a velvety caress that now, in retrospect, felt like a silken trap. 59 years behind you, 60 ahead. We must make this one truly special." Her eyes, usually quick to dart away when I sought genuine connection, would hold mine, though they seemed to possess a curious flatness, a lack of the familiar spark. I attributed it to the excitement of the impending celebration, the natural effervescence of a woman planning a significant event. How painfully naive I was, blinded by a devotion that bordered on delusion. Our son, David, usually aloof and preoccupied with his burgeoning, albeit somewhat erratic, career in finance, had suddenly become attentive, almost solicitous. He'd spend evenings with me in my study, ostensibly to discuss market trends, but his questions would subtly veer towards my business, Thorne and Associates. "Dad, how liquid are your assets really? You know, in case you ever wanted to diversify." He'd make casual inquiries about my various investment portfolios, about the intricacies of the family trust, about the clauses of my will. His interest, I convinced myself, was merely the budding curiosity of a young man learning the ropes from his successful father. His quick, nervous glances at Eleanor, when he thought I wasn't looking, were dismissed as the unconscious habits of a dutiful son seeking his mother's approval. His forced laughter at my dry architectural anecdotes, usually met with an impatient sigh, echoed strangely in the quiet room. "You're going to make us so proud, Dad," he'd declare, raising an imaginary toast with his water glass at dinner, his eyes glinting with an unreadable emotion. And then there was Clara, my daughter, my sensitive, artistic Clara. She was the one I worried about the most, the one who carried the unspoken burdens of our family. She had always been distant from the practicalities of our wealth, preferring the abstract world of art history. Yet, in those weeks, she had become unusually interested in the family's financial legacy. "Daddy, how does inheritance really work? Does it always have to be divided? What if someone wanted to protect their share?" Her questions, delivered with a childlike innocence, seemed incongruous with her usual intellectual pursuits. Her hugs, usually light and spontaneous, became clinging, almost desperate. "You're going to be so proud of us, Dad," she had whispered too tightly, too long, on the morning of my birthday. Her words, now echoing in my mind, felt like a premonition, a final, cruel warning I had chosen to ignore. Her eyes, brimming with unshed tears, were the only crack in their perfectly rehearsed facade. I dismissed them as a daughter's natural sadness at her father's advancing age, a sentimental embrace of a new decade. The air in the living room was thick with a sweetness that felt cloying artificial. Vanilla from the cake, yes, but also the heavy, saccharine perfume of expectation. My 60th birthday. A milestone, they called it. A turning point. And yet, standing there, surveying the scene, I felt only a profound unease. The streamers hung limp from the ceiling. Balloons with 60 and still golden, printed in tacky, shimmering glitter bobbed against the ornate chandelier. The scent of vanilla, cloying and insistent, clung to everything. Eleanor claimed to have baked the cake herself, a pretense I humored. I knew it had come from the artisanal bakery downtown, just like her meticulous hair and makeup came from her expensive salon. Even my old college buddy, Greg, was there. That was the first true discordant note in their carefully constructed symphony. Greg and I hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since a quiet disagreement over a failed investment he'd urged me into. His presence felt strategic. A witness. A planted element in their elaborate tableau. But I pushed the feeling aside, as I always had. For decades, it had been my default setting. Push the doubt down. Smile. And be grateful. Grateful for this beautiful house, for my thriving architectural firm, for the life we had built. Grateful for Eleanor, who had always seemed to embody everything I lacked in social grace and effortless charm. Grateful for David and Clara, who were, I believed, the very best parts of me made flesh. The evening proceeded with a chilling smoothness. They toasted to my health, to my long and successful career, to the pillar I had been for the family. Each word, a carefully placed brick in their edifice of deceit. I almost believed them. Almost. The champagne, crisp and cold, coated my tongue, a fleeting pleasure. But there was a moment, just a flicker, when I caught David's eye. He was across the room, leaning against the antique fireplace, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. His gaze met Eleanor's, a quick, almost imperceptible exchange. Not affection. Not even recognition. Just a confirmation. A signal. Like, it's almost time. The chill that went through me was not from the champagne. It was the first true tremor of the seismic shift that was about to occur. And then it came. Just as I plunged the ornate silver knife into the vanilla cake, its sugary scent filling the air, Eleanor cleared her throat. The sound, amplified by the sudden hush in the room, seemed to crackle with an unnatural energy. She reached into her designer purse, pulled out a thick manila envelope, unnaturally thick, I noted, with an architect's eye for proportion, and placed it beside the half-cut cake plate, its heavy thud echoing in the sudden silence. She smiled, a serene, almost triumphant expression. Her sapphire eyes, usually so expressive, were flat, unreadable. "You might want to read that before dessert, William." I looked at the envelope, then at her. Confused. A strange, surreal detachment settled over me. A prank. It had to be. A morbid, tasteless joke for my 60th birthday. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for the envelope. My fingers, accustomed to the rough texture of blueprints and the cool precision of drafting tools, felt clumsy, alien. I pulled out the contents. The first words, stark and unforgiving, leaped off the page, shattering everything. Petition for dissolution of marriage. For a moment, the world tilted. The golden light of the living room blurred. The scent of vanilla became nauseating. A prank. It had to be. A morbid, tasteless joke for my 60th birthday. I looked up, searching their faces for the familiar glimmer of mischief, the telltale twitch of a suppressed laugh. Clara's eyes were wet, glistening with unshed tears. But she didn't speak. She didn't move. She simply stood there, a silent, tearful witness to my public execution. David? My son? He raised his champagne glass, a chillingly calm gesture. His voice, usually so filled with youthful exuberance, was now flat, cold, devoid of warmth. "No hard feelings, Dad. It's just time." He took a slow, deliberate sip of his champagne, his gaze unwavering, almost challenging, a silent dare. I was frozen. Not angry. Not devastated. Not yet. Just hollow. An empty vessel, resounding with the echoes of a life I thought I knew. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the crushing weight of betrayal, from the shock of a world turned upside down. I looked at Eleanor. 29 years. We built a life. a family, a home. I had poured my entire being into it, brick by painful brick, trusting every foundation, every beam. And here she was, smiling like this was just business. A neat, well-prepared transaction. A carefully calculated exit strategy. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the file folder my daughter, Clara, then handed me. Her hand was steady now, her tears momentarily forgotten, replaced by a strange, almost defiant resolve. She had stapled printouts, screenshots, emails, bank statements, a meticulously compiled dossier of my own destruction. The whole thing was already mapped out, pre-planned, executed with a chilling precision that mirrored my own professional skill. They weren't just leaving me. They had already taken steps to replace me, to erase me. The documents laid it bare, transfers of my company's intellectual property, discussions about rerouting client contracts, even plans for selling the house. All, I saw, initiated months ago, when their smiles had been at their most effusive, their love at its most convincing. And that's when it happened. Not a tear. Not a scream. Not a single word of accusation. The hollowness, the shock, the cold dread, it all coalesced into something new. Something hard. Something dangerous. I smiled. A slow, chilling smile that I didn't know I possessed. It was a strange, almost alien sensation, the muscles of my face stretching in an unfamiliar way. It wasn't a smile of mirth or a surrender. It was the smile of a man who suddenly saw the entire board, who understood the game, who had already moved his pieces, silently, invisibly, while they celebrated their perceived victory. Because while they were busy plotting, while they whispered behind locked doors and exchanged conspiratorial glances, I was busy listening. While they laughed behind my back, believing me to be a dull, predictable fool, I was building a firewall around everything we owned. While they planned to cut me out, to strip me bare and leave me adrift, I was making sure I was the one holding the knife. The one with the true power. But they didn't know that yet. They thought this was checkmate. They believed they had one. But the game had just begun. I didn't say a word. The silence I offered was not a silence of defeat, but a silence of profound power. I folded the papers neatly, the legal documents rustling softly in my hands, and set them beside the half-cut cake. The vanilla scent, still heavy in the air, suddenly felt like a victory flag for me. Then, I walked to the mahogany bar in the corner. Not champagne. Whiskey. Neat. The good one, the 25-year-old single malt I had been saving for retirement, for the quiet contemplation of a life well lived. Guess this counted as a new form of retirement. I poured myself a generous measure, the amber liquid glinting in the crystal glass. The cool glass felt solid, real, in my trembling hand. I walked back to the center of the room, raising the glass slowly, not in a toast, but in a silent acknowledgement of the new reality. My gaze swept over Eleanor, then David, then Clara. They expected a reaction. Screaming, maybe. Tears, at least. A public breakdown. But I just sat back on the plush armchair, taking a slow, deliberate sip of the whiskey, letting its warmth spread through my chest, and smiled. That's when Eleanor's confident smile twitched. Just a flicker. A hairline fracture in her carefully constructed facade. She wasn't ready for calm. She was prepared for war, for my predictable rage, for my heartbroken accusations. But not for silence. Not for this chilling, knowing stillness. You see, 2 months before this little betrayal party, I had noticed changes. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible to anyone not trained to recognize the subtle shifts in structural integrity. Eleanor started locking her phone, never leaving it unattended. I'd hear muffled conversations when I walked into the kitchen, followed by abrupt silences. David, my usually indifferent son, suddenly asked more questions about the business. About its structure, its assets, its future projections. He'd bring up hypothetical scenarios involving inheritance taxes and the ease of offshore transfers, always with an innocent, "Just curious, Dad," tone. Clara, my daughter, who had never cared for finances, suddenly wanted to learn how inheritance worked, how trusts were structured, how assets were transferred. She even asked me to recommend her to a particular financial advisor she'd found online, a man whose name I vaguely recognized as a known shark in the industry, a specialist in dissolving complex estates. They spoke in hushed tones when I entered a room. Their laughter often died abruptly, replaced by forced coughs and nervous smiles. They would exchange quick, almost imperceptible glances, small signals of complicity. My life had always been governed by logic and precision. My professional success as an architect was built on foresight, on identifying potential weaknesses in design before they became catastrophic failures. I saw patterns, I understood hidden stresses. And now, the patterns I was seeing in my own home were profoundly disturbing. The little whispers, the locked doors, the sudden financial curiosity. It was a blueprint for something far more sinister than mere marital discord. It was a plan. A cold, calculated plan to divest me of my life's work, my legacy. So I did what any man, with a functioning brain and a lifetime's experience in anticipating structural failures, would do. I watched. I listened. And I began moving the pieces. Not reactively, but proactively. My first call, made from a secure, untraceable burner phone I'd bought with cash, was to an old acquaintance, a forensic accountant named Julian Thorne. Not related, but a man with a reputation for unearthing the most deeply buried financial secrets. I gave him a vague, hypothetical scenario. Imagine, Julian, a complex family trust with multiple beneficiaries. How would one discreetly identify potential vulnerabilities or track attempts at unauthorized access or manipulation? He understood immediately, his voice professional, without judgment. It would require a deep dive, William, into every transaction, every digital footprint. But it's possible. I authorized him to proceed, giving him discreet access to our family's digital financial footprint. My second call was to Robert Jennings, my most trusted business partner at Thorne & Associates. Robert had been with me for over 20 years, a man of unwavering loyalty and impeccable ethics. I didn't tell him the whole truth, not yet. I simply expressed a precautionary measure, in light of recent market volatility and a desire for enhanced asset protection for my retirement and the firm's long-term stability. Robert, understanding my cautious nature, meticulously executed my instructions. We restructured the company's ownership, creating a series of interlocking trusts, each layered and legally impenetrable. These trusts listed me as the sole controlling beneficiary, with highly specific clauses. A clause that, in case of divorce or legal dispute, would freeze all distributions and liquidations until a third-party audit confirmed no misconduct from any other listed beneficiaries. A clause that, in effect, locked them out completely from the true wealth of Thorne & Associates. I also quietly appointed Robert as an independent trustee for David and Clara's future educational funds, stipulating that these funds would only be accessible based on demonstrable academic achievement and ethical conduct, and could be revoked entirely in cases of proved financial malfeasance or severe misconduct towards the primary beneficiary, meaning me. They had no idea. Every time David smiled across the dinner table, boasting about his nascent career and dropping hints about his future leadership role in my firm, he was eating food paid for by a company he would never own, not without my express and revocable consent. Every time Eleanor asked if I'd finally signed those retirement transition papers, where she would become the designated beneficiary for a significant portion of my pension and company shares, she was begging for access I had already revoked. For a vault I had already emptied of its true treasures. Even our house, the sprawling property we had built together, the supposed symbol of our shared life. She thought it was in both our names, a 50-50 split. It wasn't. 3 years ago, after a financial scare, I meticulously fabricated involving a minor market downturn. I had convinced her it was wise to refinance and buy out her share, putting the house solely in my name for tax efficiency and streamlined asset management. She had readily agreed, blinded by the promise of immediate liquidity and trusting my financial acumen implicitly. She had even invested her liquidated share in a sure thing with David, a disastrous tech startup that had quietly imploded, a fact she'd never revealed to me, but that Julian Thorne had unearthed with alarming ease. So when she served those divorce papers, thinking she'd get half, she was walking into an empty vault, a beautifully furnished cage that held no real value for her. But I didn't tell them that. Not yet. I let them sit there, gloating, toasting, clinking glasses like they'd won. They had no idea I had already changed my will, disinheriting David and Clara entirely from the core family wealth, with provisions for their future education contingent on specific, non-negotiable conditions, conditions that were now under the sole discretion of a neutral third-party trustee. My business lawyer, Eleanor Vance, a woman as sharp and unforgiving as her namesake, loyal to me for over 20 years, was merely waiting for my call, the trigger on a meticulously constructed legal siege. She already had all the documents prepared, filed, ready to be executed at a moment's notice. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because they asked, not because the thought of sharing a bed with Eleanor, knowing her betrayal, was abhorrent, but because I wanted to be alone. Alone with my victory marinating like a fine, potent wine. I needed to fully taste the silence, to savor the profound solitude that was not born of loneliness, but of an almost terrifying freedom. In the quiet darkness, I remembered something Eleanor once said, years ago, during a petty argument about my meticulously organized office. "You're predictable, William. Safe. Boring." She was right. I had been predictable. Safe. Boring. A man who always chose stability, who always believed in the inherent goodness of those he loved. But not anymore. The predictability was gone. The safety shattered. The boring man, the quiet architect, had been reborn. He was now a silent strategist, a master of unseen forces, moving in the shadows while they danced in the light. At exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, as the city began to hum with its daily rhythm, I pressed send. 3 emails left my draft simultaneously, each a perfectly timed domino in my carefully designed cascade. One to Eleanor Vance, my business lawyer. Subject: Execute Phase 2. This was the signal to initiate the legal motions, to begin the systematic dismantling of Eleanor's and David's financial claims, to freeze their assets, and to launch the fraud investigation. One to my bank, a direct, no-nonsense directive. Subject: Revoke joint access, all accounts, effective immediately. This was the financial lockdown, hitting their personal and joint accounts. And one to the family group chat, a deceptively simple message. Subject: You wanted this. I waited. Didn't even take 5 minutes. The first message came from Clara, my daughter. Her text was frantic, filled with exclamation marks and emojis. "Dad? What's going on with the Chase account? My cards declined. What's happening? I can't access anything." Her carefully cultivated calm had shattered. Then, almost immediately, David's message. More controlled, but laced with a barely concealed panic. "Father, why is there a hold on the trust distributions? I thought we agreed on a transfer today. What is this?" Agreed? You thought wrong, David. Your agreement was based on a lie, and mine was based on a different kind of truth. I didn't respond. I simply watched the messages pile up, a silent testament to their dawning realization, their carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Eleanor tried calling. Twice. Then again. Her calls came in quick succession, each one a sharp, insistent demand for an answer. I let it ring, the vibrant melody of her favorite ringtone mocking her desperation. The phone screen glowed with her name, a name that now evoked only a cold, clinical detachment. That afternoon, she came home early. Her impeccable hair was disheveled, a few strands escaping her usually perfect chignon, her makeup smudged. Her expensive cashmere sweater was slightly rumpled. Her fake smile, so unwavering the night before, now trembled at the corners, threatening to shatter. She held a bottle of wine, my favorite, a rich Bordeaux. Like peace could be poured into a glass and make this all go away, could wash away the bitter taste of their greed and fear. "William?" she asked softly, her voice uncharacteristically small, pleading, almost childlike. "Can we talk? Please? What's going on? What's happening with the accounts? David and Clara are in a panic." Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the raw panic beneath. I gestured toward the kitchen chair. Let her sit. Watched her squirm, her elegant hands twisting the neck of the wine bottle, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. The vanilla scent still lingered from the cake, now a stale reminder of her cruel spectacle. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears that seemed to materialize on command, glistening theatrically. I felt invisible. I felt like you never truly saw me. You were always so busy with your work, your plans." She paused, seeking a flicker of sympathy, an opening for manipulation. "You made me invisible, Eleanor," I said, my voice cold, measured, each word precisely placed, like stones in a new, unshakable foundation. "You turned our children against me, teaching them that silence means weakness, that loyalty is a negotiable commodity, that a parent is merely a bank account to be exploited. You planned to strip everything I built, everything I cherished, everything I poured my life into, and now you want sympathy? Now you want to claim victimhood because your plan didn't quite work out?" Her tears flowed freely now, silently tracing paths down her carefully made-up cheeks. But she didn't deny it, because she couldn't. The truth, stark and undeniable, hung heavy in the air between us, a tangible thing that suffocated her. That's when I dropped the next bomb. Not loudly, not with a shout, just with the quiet, authoritative precision of a man stating undeniable fact, like an architect presenting a structural report. "I'm filing for full ownership of Thorne and Associates under breach of fiduciary trust," I said, watching her face crumble. "I have irrefutable proof that David, with your full knowledge and encouragement, attempted to forge internal documents related to company assets. These documents were specifically designed to illegally transfer intellectual property and client contracts out of my name. Embezzlement charges are being prepared for David and for you as his direct accomplice." Her face, already pale, dropped further, becoming a mask of utter, profound horror. Her breath hitched. I wasn't done. "You'll both be served on Monday with court summons. And your friend, Greg? He was a witness to your little performance last night, but he was also involved in some of David's more questionable financial maneuvers regarding the firm. He'll also be called to testify. Tell your lover to get a good lawyer. He'll need one. My legal team has also compiled a comprehensive dossier on his recent business practices and a history of his own past corporate malfeasance. Your former CO will be very interested in it, as will the SEC." She froze, her eyes wide, staring at me as if I were a stranger, a monster she had conjured, a force of nature she had utterly failed to predict. "You knew?" she choked, her voice barely a whisper, filled with the dawning, terrifying realization. "You knew about everything? About David and Greg? About him?" I leaned in, my gaze unwavering, my voice dropping to a near inaudible murmur, yet carrying the full weight of my chilling resolve. Like the silent rumble of an earthquake. "I always knew," I stated, a ghost of my earlier smile touching my lips, a cold, precise acknowledgement of her profound miscalculation. "The only question was what you would do, and how far you were willing to go to prove me right." I stood up, leaving her sitting there, shaking, alone, the unpoured wine in her hand a symbol of the peace she could no longer buy, the comfort she no longer deserved. The quiet hum of the house felt almost like a sigh of relief, as if the very walls had finally been freed from the burden of her deceit. The next week was chaos. For them. For me, it was the methodical execution of a perfectly designed plan. Court motions flooded the legal system. Emergency hearings were called. Account audits laid bare their attempted fraud, their intricate web of deception. My lawyers, led by Eleanor Vance, moved with ruthless efficiency, their legal strategy a relentless siege. They presented the evidence with a cold, undeniable logic that shattered every one of their carefully constructed lies. The judge sided with me. Of course he did. I had the evidence. Emails, messages, voice memos that Julian Thorne had painstakingly retrieved from Clara's cloud storage, from David's discarded laptop, from Eleanor's secure encrypted messaging app. They were damning, irrefutable. Each piece of data was a brick in the wall of their demise. David tried to apologize, his voice a pathetic mix of fear and remorse, his eyes wide with a dawning understanding of the catastrophic consequences of his choices. I simply looked at him, my expression unreadable. You made your choice, David. You chose greed. You chose to participate in a scheme that would have left your father destitute. There's no inheritance for traitors. Not from me. His face crumpled, the realization of his utterly barren future settling upon him. Clara, my daughter, begged me to just talk to Mom. To make this all go away. Her once bright eyes now dull with desperation. I looked at her, my heart aching with a profound, weary sadness for the daughter I had lost, the child who had willingly participated in my downfall, handing me the very documents of my destruction. I did, Clara, I told her, my voice weary yet firm. She lied to my face with a smile on her lips. You watched. And you handed me the papers. You chose your path. And Eleanor, my wife. Well, she got the birthday she'll never forget. Divorce papers she could not fight. Freezing orders on every account she thought she controlled. An empty bank account. A public exposure that shamed her beyond measure, stripping away every ounce of her social standing. Her lover, Greg, vanished the moment the legal papers were served, his loyalty evaporating with the first hint of scandal and financial ruin. I didn't shout, didn't fight. I let the law do the talking. I let the truth dismantle their carefully constructed lies. And I walked away, not as a victim, but as a victor in a silent, intellectual war. The morning after everything was finalized, I stood at the edge of our property. Not mine anymore. Not hers either. The house, the sprawling gardens, the life we had built, it was all now simply land, waiting for someone else's tragedy, someone else's hopes, someone else's dreams to be built upon its ashes. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant, burning leaves. A new season. A new beginning. The scent of vanilla, thankfully, was long gone. My lawyer, Eleanor Vance, stood beside me, a formidable presence, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. She handed me the last envelope, the one containing the court's final ruling. Company, 100% mine, with all fraudulent claims dismissed. Estate assets, secured and protected, pending final civil suit outcomes against Eleanor and David, which were now inevitable and ruinous for them. Custodial trusts for the children, revoked, with new, independent educational funds established solely by me, managed by a neutral, independent third-party trustee, accessible only upon reaching specific academic and ethical milestones, and only if they initiated contact and demonstrated genuine remorse. Marriage. Dissolved, with the judge's ruling citing unreconcilable differences stemming from material misrepresentation and financial misconduct. I signed one more paper, a final formality. And that was it. Closure. In ink. A quiet, yet immensely powerful moment. I didn't attend the auction of the house. Didn't care to witness the look in their eyes when the sheriff's office showed up with a locksmith, officially dispossessing them. That was not my burden. That was their consequence. I heard later that Eleanor had tried to plead with the new owners to no avail. David had disappeared, likely to avoid the embezzlement charges. Clara, distraught and financially cut off, had moved in with an elderly aunt, her artistic dream shattered by her mother's ruin. I moved into a downtown loft. Smaller, simpler, cleaner. Its minimalist design reflected my new internal landscape, uncluttered, focused, devoid of unnecessary attachments. The large windows overlooked the city's skyline, a constant reminder of the structures I still built, the world I still shaped, on my own terms. The relentless hum of the city outside became a soothing white noise, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the empty house. My phone rang less. The incessant calls from David and Clara, their pleas, their thinly veiled accusations, had finally stopped. They'd unfollowed me on every platform, blocked my number. Or maybe I'd blocked theirs? Hard to remember the specifics now. The details of their desperate attempts to reconnect, to salvage some semblance of the life they had so carelessly discarded, had blurred into an indistinct hum, fading into the background of my peaceful existence. What I do remember, with crystalline clarity, is peace. Not the kind that comes with music or tropical vacations or forced celebrations, but the kind that walks into a room, finds no voices waiting to accuse it, no shadows lurking in the corners, and simply settles. A profound, deep, unshakable peace that permeated every fiber of my being. One morning, nearly 5 years after that fateful birthday, I found myself walking through the bustling city market. The air was vibrant with the smells of fresh produce, spices, and baked goods. I was on my way to a meeting, my architectural firm now recognized as a leader in sustainable urban development, its reputation not just restored, but elevated, built on a foundation of unyielding integrity. I felt light, unburdened, the rhythm of my steps perfectly aligned with the beat of my own healthy heart. My life was full, rich with purpose, free from deceit. And then I passed her. She was standing near a street vendor, haggling over a small, tarnished silver ring, her voice sharp, querulous, tinged with a bitterness that was palpable even from a distance. Her back was to me, but I recognized the set of her shoulders, the once familiar curve of her neck. Her hair, once raven and meticulously styled, was now streaked with prominent gray, pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun, her face etched with hard lines that spoke of a life filled with regret and hardship. Her once impeccable designer clothes were replaced by ill-fitting, worn garments, faded and cheap. Eleanor. The vibrant color she had claimed to embody had drained away, leaving only a pale, bitter imitation of the woman she once was. She looked up, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, and her eyes met mine. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of recognition, a spark of the old Eleanor, crossed her face. But it was quickly extinguished, replaced by a raw, naked despair, a dawning comprehension of the vast chasm between our present realities. The woman who had left me for dead, who had dismissed me as dull and predictable, saw the man I had become, strong, dignified, utterly free. There was no joy in her eyes, no sign of the passion she had so desperately sought. Only a profound, suffocating loneliness, a hollow echo of the life she had so carelessly squandered. She still had that necklace I bought her for our 10th anniversary, a delicate silver chain with a sapphire pendant, a stark reminder of the love she had once been offered. But there was no wedding ring on her finger. No man by her side. Greg, her lover, had vanished the moment the legal papers were served, his loyalty evaporating with the first hint of scandal and financial ruin. She had no job, her reputation in tatters. No discernible friends, her network having abandoned her in the wake of the public disgrace. She had tried to sue me for emotional distress, a final, desperate grasp at relevance, at some shred of power. It didn't work. The judge dismissed her claims without even a hearing, citing the overwhelming evidence of her own culpability. She called once, a few months ago, a fragile voicemail left on an old, forgotten number. Her voice, once so captivating, was now thin, reedy, filled with a pathetic longing. I miss what we had, William. I miss our life. Please, please call me. I didn't reply, because what we had was never real to begin with. It was an illusion, a facade, a blueprint built on a foundation of lies. And what I had now, this profound peace, this quiet joy, was built on the solid, unshakable ground of truth. I found peace not in revenge itself, but in detachment. In the act of rebuilding something new from nothing, from the ashes of betrayal. In proving to myself that my kindness was not weakness, my stability not dullness, but a profound and enduring strength. Now I spend my days designing homes for people who never saw me as weak, for clients who value integrity above all else. I mentor young architects, guiding them with a quiet wisdom born of experience, instilling in them the importance of strong foundations, both in design and in life. I volunteer at community builds, finding joy in creating tangible, meaningful structures for those who truly need them, building bridges, not walls. People say I seem calm. They say I must have had a good life, blessed with fortune and peace, untroubled by the storms of the world. They don't know the war I fought, the betrayals I buried, the family I left behind. But I do. And every quiet sunrise, every breath of crisp, clean air, every moment of genuine connection I now share, reminds me that the best revenge is no longer needing one. I simply walk past, my steps light, purposeful, leaving no trace, no shadow. The cold architect had built his new life, brick by meticulous brick, upon the solid foundation of his own integrity. And the peace that settled in my heart was profound, absolute, and richly deserved.